Do you want to learn how to set up serverless so that it is more of a production environment, similar to what you would find in a real working company? In this video series, I'm going to cover those things and I'm going to introduce them to you now. Hi guys, my name is Sam with Complete Coding, and this is the first in a video series on how to set up a more production-like serverless application. This is going to cover a lot of the technologies and the processes that you might find if you went and worked at a company that deploys and runs serverless across its platform. To start with, we're going to cover running serverless locally. This allows you to test work that you're doing without having to deploy it into a development environment. After that, we're going to look into testing and how you can do both unit tests as well as integration tests to test the full spectrum of the code so that you know when you deploy something that it is going to run well. After that, we're going to look into continuous integration and continuous deployment, which allows the pipeline of the code to deploy out to your application from just doing a push to a branch. This optimizes the deployment process and reduces the amount of work that an individual developer has to do to get their code live. As this is the start of a new project and a new video series, I'm going to talk you through the code that we're going to be starting with, which is an example serverless project, which contains both APIs and DynamoDB. I'm then going to start introducing areas and the topics on which we're going to cover in the next few videos. Now that we're in the code, we can have a look through the environment and the project that we're going to be working with over the next few videos. It has a service name. We're going to be using AWS. All of our lambdas are going to be running node 12. We have a profile which we set up in the video, which I will link at the top of the page just now. We have some environment variables which are going to be used inside the lambdas. And then we have an role statement. This allows the lambdas to do anything they want in Dynamo, S3, or simple email service. Those three are required so that we can have all of our functioning endpoints. As we scroll down, we currently have one plugin, which is the Serverless Webpack plugin. This, with the package individually, means that when we are deploying our code, Webpack will compile it down so that there is one file created per endpoint. This helps tidy up the code and means you're not uploading excess code into lambdas. As we scroll down a little bit, we have defined our custom table name and bucket name. These are going to be used inside both our endpoints, inside our environment variables, as well as inside some of the configuration later down in our resources. As we scroll down, we see our functions. The first two functions we get are regarding the player score. So this is a get and a create endpoint for creating a database record or getting a database record. As we scroll down, we have the same with a file. So these are going to be storing and retrieving JSON files from S3. And finally, we have our send email endpoint, which will be utilizing Amazon's simple email service. The last section is the resources section. In here, we have defined a bucket, which has a bucket name of the custom bucket name defined earlier in this YAML file. And we also have a DynamoDB table. This again has a table name which is defined earlier and just has a single ID defined, as well as a billing mode of pay per request. If you want any of the details on either of these two, I've linked up videos where I talk through in detail setting up both Amazon S3 buckets and DynamoDB tables. Now that we've looked at the serverless YAML file, we can look through our code. Under Lambdas, we have a common folder with 3 JS files in. The first one is an API responses file. This allows us to very easily create API responses with the correct headers, status codes, and stringifying the body. We've created a function for a couple of the response codes, so we can just pass in the data to the _400 function, and that will create the correct response format that is required for API Gateway. Next, we have dynamo.js. This is a wrapper around the DynamoDB document client. Some of the formats inside this aren't particularly nice, so having a wrapper allows you to wrap a get so that you can just pass an ID and a table name instead of all of this extra configuration. It also has a write function, and we're just exporting that module. In S3, we have something very similar, but for creating files and reading files from Amazon's S3 buckets. In here, we are getting the buckets, getting files, completing some logic on the JSON, and returning the data. And when we write, we only need to pass up the data, the file name that we want to write this data into, as well as the bucket. So that is the common code completed. Now we can go and look at the endpoints. I'm going to start with a create player score. And in here, we're expecting a path parameter of ID. And then we're going to be creating a user using the event body and writing it into the table name, which we've got from the environment variables. And then if that is successful, returning a 200 or returning a 400 response. If we then try and get that player, it's a very similar process. Taking the path parameter, doing a dynamo get, and then either returning a 404 for a missing ID or returning the user. Creating a file is very similar, where we're passing up a file name and we're sending the body into an S3 write and returning either a 200 or a 400. Get file is very similar to the get player score, where we take the file name, do an S3 get, and return a 404 or a 200. The final endpoint is send email, and in this we are getting the to address, the from address, subject and text from the event body, and then checking that they all exist, formatting it into the response format that is needed for Amazon's SES, and sending that email, returning either a 200 or a 400. That is all of the code that is required to start this project. In this series of YouTube videos, we're going to look at some of the services, some of the tools, and some of the processes that you might find if you went and worked at a company that uses serverless to deploy production systems. The first system that we're going to look at is Serverless Offline. Serverless Offline is a plugin that allows you to run an emulation of a serverless platform, but on your own machine. This is great as it allows you to test a lot of the functionality that you require without having to deploy it up to your real AWS environment. This allows you to more quickly iterate over the processes and make sure that every change you've made is working before you actually deploy it. The next video is going to be along a similar line, and that is going to be on testing. Testing is a vital part of any development process. This could be manual testing as you are deploying features, but this video is going to specifically focus on automated testing, which is unit testing and integration testing, and how we can incorporate that into not only our deployment, but into our actual design and building of features. The last topic we're going to look at in this series is continuous integration and continuous development. As a professional team of developers, you don't want to be spending your time deploying Lambdas and making sure that everything has worked. What you want to do is have that process automated. And that is exactly what continuous integration and development does. It allows you to create a pull request or push up to a branch, and then once that has been merged into the branch, it automatically runs a set of scripts to deploy that change. This is really good as it defines a very strict pipeline for how your code goes from your local environment into a remote branch and then into a deployable branch. In this video, we have talked about how we are going to set up our serverless project and how each of the components are required for a production-ready system. And we've introduced some of the concepts that we're going to cover in the next few videos about how we are going to set this environment up to replicate what you might see in a production environment. If you end up getting a job working at a company that uses serverless, you'll see a lot of these things utilized in those companies. So learning about it now really gives you the edge up, whether it's getting a job and demonstrating that you already understand those principles, or whether it's just the fact that you can get up to speed with what they're doing even quicker. If you learned something new in this video, make sure to hit that like button because it really helps me out and helps other developers like yourself learn about serverless. And if you want to learn more yourself, then make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell notification so that you get notified next time I upload a new video. Thank you, and I'll see you again next time.